Well, that worked out good. Right. Let me tell you. Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Gimel, Daf 53 of Masechta Ksubis, friends. What can I tell you about Daf 53? Oh wait, should I yawn? I feel like that's been like a thing recently. Maybe that'll like become my signature thing. I'm like the Daf Yomi guy who yawns. That could be like my shtick. It could be my shtick. I yawn. Let's go weiter. Alright, so we're going to start in Daf Nun. Oh, did I say what this page talks about? It talks about Ksubas B'nei Dichrin and also Mizonis. We're going to start in Daf Nun Beis and Beis. Yeah, I feel like I need a yawn. Excuse me. Okay, yawn successful. Alright, we're going to start in Daf Nun Beis and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of Popeh. Oh, Yasikli Livrei Be'Abba Surah. So Popeh made a shidduch, and his father-in-law to be was a fellow named Abba Surah. Who could tell me who Abba Surah was? No, I'm sorry, it's Mechutin. Sorry. Popeh made a shidduch for his son, and his Mechutin, his soon-to-be Mechutin, was Abba Surah. Who could tell me who Abba Surah is? Abba Surah was Popeh's father-in-law. L'maiseh, Popeh made a shidduch for his son with his wife's sister. Alright. Sounds very nice. Wait, can you do that? Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, yeah. Wait, what? Your mother's, no, you can't do that. Wait, what? You can't marry your mother's sister? Wait, am I making a mistake over here? You married his son. Wait, what? Can you, excuse me. Alright, fine, okay, so I just looked up in the art school because I was a little confused there. Right? You can't marry your mother's sister. It must be that from a different marriage. So it wasn't his mother's sister, it was his father's sister-in-law. Okay. Rav Papa Yasik le'livrei be'Abba Surah. So Rav Papa Lemaise was making a shidduch, and the Mechutin was going to be his father-in-law. Also lemichtav la Ksubas. So Rav Papa was heading over to Abba Surah to write Ksubit to write a Ksubit for his son and his soon-to-be daughter-in-law, and there Abba Surah would declare how much he was going to be providing for a dowry. Shama Yehuda by Meremar heard that Rav Papa was coming to town. Nofak also, so he went out. Ischazile, and he went and he met Rav Papa. Rav Papa was coming to town. Yehuda by Meremar came out to see him. Kimatu lepischa, and then they were schmoozing. Okay. When it comes to schmoozing, I'm not a schmoozer. I have a interesting relationship with schmoozing. I'm not into it. But I do it sometimes in specific settings. So now, Kimatu Lepischa, so when they got to the house of Abba Surah, Habaka Mipater Mine, so Yehuda by Meremar was like, alright, I'm gonna go. Omle Neil my badoy. So Papa says, no, come in. Come to the Ksuba writing. And her Papa saw that Yehuda Meremar didn't really want to come in. He says, wait, what's Yehuda by Meremar? What's the problem? Mishum da Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda is because Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinin a sharp one, lo tehavi ba'avure b'achsanta, that you shouldn't be involved in passing over inheritance, even from a nudnik son to a star son, a favored son, a perfect son, because you don't know who's going to come from the kid, and certainly not from the son to the daughter. Meaning, Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, don't be involved in a situation where you have two kids, and you have one kid is perceived to be a nudnik, the other one is perceived to be a big tzaddik. So the father says, you know what, I'm going to reward the big tzaddik by giving him the nudnik's, the perceived nudnik's inheritance, and maybe he even is taka, a big nudnik. But Shmuel says to Rav Yehuda, don't be involved in any situation where inheritance is going to be passed from one son and given to a different son instead of him, right? So let's say, right, so the nudnik's inheritance is going to be given over to the good guy's inheritance, and he's going to get everything, because you don't know who's going to come from the nudnik. Even if in fact he is a nudnik, maybe his son will be a big tzaddik. So therefore, don't be involved in moving around inheritances. Just let the inheritances be. And then certainly here, where the halacha is that the sons inherit the father, not the daughters, and he's going to be giving away his inheritance as a dowry to his daughter. So Rav Papa says to Yehuda bar Mereimar, he says, I don't understand. Why don't you want to come in? Is it because you don't want to be involved in Abasura giving away part of what would otherwise be left as an inheritance for his kids? He's giving it for his sons. Instead, he's giving it to his daughter as a dowry. But this is not just made up stuff. This is a takana d'Rabbanan that the father gives a dowry for his daughter. As we said yesterday, we explained how can we give a dowry. Rabbi Yochanan said the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that in order to incentivize, we have the Ksubis ben Dichrin, in order to incentivize the father-in-law to give a nice big dowry, and we quoted a pasuk, right? It says, "Chunoshim." I'm going to quote from yesterday's daf. "Chunoshim v'olidu banim uvanos u'chulu v'nechem noshim v'esmenasechem tnu lanoshim." So says Rav Papa to Yehuda bar Mereimar, why don't you come in? What's the big deal? There's no problems here. Omarle. So says Yehuda bar Mereimar, "Hanimile midaite lasuye nami." So says Yehuda bar Mereimar, says Eina chinami. It's a good thing for Abasura to provide a dowry for his daughter, but it's not a good thing if I force him to give more than he wants to give. To which our Papa says to Yehuda bar Mereimar, I didn't say go in there and force Abasura to give a big, large dowry. Go in there and just sit there. Don't say anything. And let Abasura give however big or small of a dowry he wants. But Yehuda bar Mereimar says, but the thing is, because of my stature, because of, if I'm there, Abasura is going to feel like he's going to have to increase his dowry more than he'd be comfortable with. If I wasn't there, so then he would just, interesting. It reminds me, just coming to mind now, you ever see The Godfather? Which Godfather was it? Probably the second one. I think it was probably the second one. I think it was the second one, the second Godfather movie. When they have the court case and they bring the guy's brother from Italy, because him being there, right, the guy was an informant. He turned the state witness or something, and they didn't want the fellow to tell on them, so they brought in his brother from Italy or probably from Sicily or something, and him just being there, the brother was not gonna tattletale. So meaning the point is just that presence led to a different outcome. So therefore, says Yehuda bar Mereimar, simply my presence in the room is going to affect Abasura's, how he presents himself, and he's going to declare a dowry that is more than he would actually have liked to declare and provide, but he's going to increase it just by me merely sitting in the room and being present in the room. So it says, if I come in, Hainu Asiya Memele is going to end up, in a sense, forcing Abasura to commit to a dowry that is larger than he would have otherwise have liked to provide. But nonetheless, Rav Papa convinced him to go in. Ishtik v'Yosef. Okay, so Yehuda bar Mereimar went in, and he was sitting quietly. He wasn't going. He was going to do his best to not affect anything. But of course, Abasura was like, yo, Yehuda Mereimar is here. Why is he not saying anything? Why is he not saying oh wow, that's a very nice dowry that you're providing? Why is he just staying shut, keeping quiet? He must be upset. I must not be giving enough. So Abba Surah then committed to everything that he owns for the Ksubis. And even after Abba Surah committed to everything that he owns, still Yehuda bar Meimah was just sitting there keeping quiet. And Abba Surah says, still, Gornish, you're not saying epis. I have nothing left. What else can I give? To which Yehuda bar Meimah finally spoke up. He says, look, I'll tell you the truth. I wouldn't have even intended for you to give even the initial amount that you wrote in the Ksuba. That would have, that sounded perfectly reasonable to me. To which Abba Surah says, you mean I didn't have to give away everything that I own? So maybe I could take it back. To which Yehuda bar Meimah says, no, but at the same time, I'm not suggesting that you should go back on your word. You already committed everything that you have. So there it is. It's everything that you have. So that's an interesting story. What was the moral of the story? Why is this relevant? I don't know. Well, I guess it's interesting because yesterday we said that you shouldn't give away more than 1/10 of your net worth in the dowry. But interestingly, at the same time, it sounds like if you did give away everything that you own, it works. Yeah. I was speaking to a Yid at WeWork earlier today. He was away. He was in Seattle for a few weeks. It was taka good to see him because he's there in the morning. I get there early in the morning. He gets there early in the morning. He's often there before me. He teaches, he's from Seattle. So he teaches a chevre at night in Seattle. And here in Eretz Yisrael, it's like 5, 6 in the morning. So we were schmoozing a little bit. We like to, talk schmooze about the Gemara. So, anyways, we were talking about this Indian, about people really, going into tremendous debt in order to pay for a dowry and pay for like an apartment and things like that. I mean, it sounds like it's similar over here with Abba Surah. He really gave away everything he owned for this dowry. Interesting. So Rav Yemar Sove asked Rav Nachman, what if you have a woman who sells her ksubah to her husband? She makes a deal, right? She says, I imagine that probably the deal is something like, look, my ksubah, if we get divorced, the ksubah is worth X amount. But we may not get divorced. If we get divorced, you're going to have to pay me, I don't know, $1,000. If we don't get divorced, you're never going to have to pay me anything. How about this? Why don't you give me $500 cash right now? If we end up getting divorced, you end up saving $500. If we don't end up getting divorced, you end up losing $500. Right? So she makes a deal with him. She sells him the ksubah, and now in the event that they get divorced, he won't have to pay her anything. So if she sells her ksubah to her husband, she makes a deal with him, and she gets some cash, and the ksubah is now sold. So now, yesh lo ksubas b'nindichron or ein lo ksubas b'nindichron. So what happens to the ksubas b'nindichron? So he just bought her ksubah from her, and now it belongs to him. If he dies, so then it becomes part of the inheritance that he outherits to. Sorry, Dennis, that he outherits to his kids. So now, do we say, well, she sold her ksubah to the husband, and therefore, along with the sale, it's the ksubah and all of the stipulations of the ksubah, including the ksubas b'nindichron, and therefore, when the husband dies, the dowry of this wife's father doesn't necessarily go to her kids. It's divided equally among all the kids. Or do we say that no, she sold her value of the ksubah, but the ksubas b'nindichron, the fact that her father made a nice dowry with the intention of it going to his grandkids, that remains intact. So that's the question, right? So again, If you have a woman who sells a ksuba to her husband, yesh la ksubas b'nin dichrin or ein la ksubas b'nin dichrin. So what happens with the ksubas b'nin dichrin? Does her ksuba go to her kids, or does that sort of get what's the word I'm thinking? I had the word and I forgot. Forfeited when she sells it. Amli Rava v'tibar lech mocheles. Says Rava, why don't you ask about the more common case, which is she doesn't sell it to her husband, but she says, look, don't worry about the ksuba. I know we have a ksuba. If we get divorced, you have to pay me. Don't worry about it. She's moichel zan. So Amalei, Hashta Mocheres coming boyali, to which Rav Yemar Sava says, look, I'm interested in knowing the answer about Mocheres, because because you might be able to argue Zuze Ansua, that look, she was strapped for cash. Why did she sell her ksuba to her husband? Because she needed some cash. The Amina command kamachula me uchle b'uchla. That I'll say that it's like, she needed cash, she didn't have any cash. It was as though metaphorically they were whipping her 100 lashes with a whip that has metal at the end. Friends, what do you think? It sounds very uncomfortable. To be whipped 100 times with a whip that has metal on it. That sounds very unpleasant. So in order to extract herself from such an unpleasant metaphorical situation, i.e. that she needs money, she sold her ksuba to get some cash. So Moches ksuba, okay, so where am I? So I'm not talking about Mocheles when she voluntarily, volitionally, willingly says, look, you can keep the ksuba. I'm talking about when she's strapped for cash and it's as though they're whipping her with 100 lashes with a whip with metal on it. So when she sells her ksuba to her husband, is the ksubas b'nin dichrin maintained? Omar Rava Pshitali, Rava says, look, it's obvious to be mocheres ksuba la'acherim, that if she sells her ksuba to other people, yesh la ksubas b'nin dichrin, then she has the ksubas b'nin dichrin. My time out come zuzi ansua, because it was ones, it was out of the fact that she needed money, that she was kind of forced into a situation where that led to selling her ksuba, but the ksubas b'nin dichrin, however, vis-a-vis her children would be preserved. Mocheles ksubasa, if she just says, look, I'm being moichel, you can have the ksuba, don't worry about me. Mocheles ksuba levaila, ein lo ksubas b'nei dichrin. She doesn't have ksubas b'nei dichrin. She says, look, I don't need any of this. I don't need the ksuba. I don't need the tanai ksuba. It's all yours. So then there's, she forfeited everything, including the ksubas b'nei dichrin. My time, how come? Achule achilta. Look, she says she doesn't need it. By Rave, what Rave wants to know is mocheres ksubasa levaila, that however, if she sells her ksube but to her husband, right? We said if she sells it to other people, then there's ksubas b'nei dichrin. If she's moichel to her husband, then there's no ksubas b'nei dichrin. What if she sells it to her husband? Right? Mocheres ksubasa levaila ki mocheres la'acherim dami. So do we say that when she sells it to her husband, it's like she sold it to other people and there is ksubas b'nei dichrin? Or is it like she's moichel to her husband and then there's no ksubas b'nei dichrin? After Rava asked the kasha, he gave a teretz. Mocheres ksuba levaila, that a woman who sells her ksuba to her husband, drum roll please, k'mocheres la'acherim dami. It's like she sells it to other people and there's ksubas b'nei dichrin. Ravidi bar Ovin asks a kasha. Mesa, friends, this comes from Yevamis. Friends, who can tell me what we learned in Masechta Yevamis? We learned in Masechta Yevamis that if one witness comes and says to a woman that her husband died, so then she goes and gets remarried, and then the husband shows up, he's taka alive, so he says that she has to be divorced, she can't be with either one of them, and she doesn't get a ksubah. She can't remain with either one of them, and she doesn't get a ksubah from either one of them. And it says in that Mishnah Mesa that if she dies, ein yorshin shalzeh, ein yorshin shalzeh, yorshin ksubasa, that neither the inheritors of the first husband nor the inheritors of the second husband inherit her ksuba. We ask Ksuba, what Ksuba? I thought we said she doesn't inherit it. She doesn't get a Ksuba when she leaves either husband. So Vamar Papa Ksubas bin Dichrin, and it says her Papa, it's talking about Ksubas bin Dichrin. Ve'amai, why shouldn't we preserve the Ksubas bin Dichrin? Hachanami lema yetzer ansa. Let's say that the reason why she married the second husband without doing proper due diligence is because her Yetzer Hara was overcoming her to get married to this fellow, and therefore she didn't do proper due diligence. But let's say that just like when we say Zuze Ansa, that when she sells her Ksuba to somebody else because she's strapped for cash, so the Ksubas bin Dichrin is preserved. So why don't we say here as well that if she dies, there is Ksubas bin Dichrin for the kids? Because Yetzer Ansa Hasam Kanasu de Kansur Rabbanan, if you remember from Masechta Yevamis, in this context, right, we say, look, with one witness you can get remarried, but we rely upon her to do due diligence to the extent that if it turns out that the husband shows up, then we get super machmir and say, that you can't be with either one of them anymore, and you don't get a ksuba, and there's no ksubas bin dichrin. We have to lay on the chumras in order to ensure that she's going to do a proper due diligence. But over here, if she had to sell her ksuba because she mamish needed money, so then she would retain the ksubas bin dichrin. Yosef Ravin bar Chanina Kamidu of Chizde. Oh, so Ravin bar Chanina was sitting before of Chizde. Yosef come and he says, "Mishmeinte Rebbe Lazar, Mocheles Ksubasa, that if if a wife says to her husband, look, you can have the ksuba, I don't need it, the violet to her husband, Ein la mizonis, well then she doesn't get mizonis." Interesting. Meaning if she's Mocheles Ksuba, she says, look, I don't need the ksuba, and I don't need any of the Tanai Ksubas. I don't need any of it. And therefore, if he dies, she doesn't get sustained by the estate. Omarle, to which Rav Chizda responds to Ravin bar Chanina, he says, if not for the fact that you had said this in the name of such a great person, Rabbi Lazar, I would have said to you, Meshiv probably. Meshiv ra tachas tova lo somush ra mi beis, so that if a fellow repays evil for good deeds, there won't be any, right? There will be lots of evil in his house. Meaning, she did him a favor by saying, "Don't worry about the ksube," and now she's forfeiting her mizonis. So I would have thought to say that that's a pretty nudniki thing of the husband to do. That she forfeited a ksube to him, and now he's not paying her mizon, providing her mizonis from the estate. But Rabbi Lazar says no. When she's mocheles the ksube, she's mocheles the ksube, and all, any stipulations, anything attached to it, including mizonis. Yosef of Nachman v'Ula v'Avimi by Rav Papi. So if Nachman, Ula, and Avimi by Rav Papi were sitting, Mistama, they weren't just sitting around. Mistama, they were talking and learning, as we're about to see. Yosef of Chia bar Ami Gabai, Rav Chia bar Ami was sitting with them. Also, Gavra came a fellow, the Shriva Rusaso, that he was betrothed, he was engaged, and his fiance died. Amri Lein, they said to him, Zil Kvar, or Havla Ksubasa. Either give her a Ksuba, which I imagine, she's dead, so she doesn't get the Ksuba unless maybe her inheritors would get it. So either give her a Ksuba or bury her. Because, right, we say Kvurasa Tachas Ksubasa. That when he gives her the Ksuba, so then he also, right, meaning she brings into the marriage the dowry, so he has to pay for her funeral. So Amalu Rav Chia, so Rav Chia says to them, Tanina, we learn in the Mishnah, Ishto Arusa, that if his wife is engaged, lo onim v'lo mitamila, so if he's a kohen, he doesn't practice aninos, and right, which would prevent him from eating kochim v'lo mitamila, it doesn't become tummy to her to go to the cemetery if they were only engaged. V'chein hi lo onenes v'lo mitama lo, she doesn't practice any aninos, and she does not become tummy to him to go to the cemetery if he dies. Mesa, if she dies, enu yarsha, he does not inherit her dowry. Mes, who, if he dies, govak subasu, she collects her ksuba. Taima de mes, who, so we're saying if he dies, she collects the ksuba. Ha mesa he, but if she dies, ain't no ksuba. She doesn't have a ksuba, and therefore, he shouldn't have to bury her. My taima, How come? Amar Voshaya says of Voshaya, Sheinani Koreba, because I cannot, right? Because in the Ksubah it says, that when you are able to marry somebody else, i.e., if I die or if we get divorced, so then take what is written in the Ksubah. But she wouldn't ever, she's dead. She wouldn't ever be able to collect, to marry anybody else, right? So therefore she also can't collect the Ksubah, which would make him responsible to pay for her burial. Okay, so therefore it says of Chia that actually it sounds like he shouldn't be responsible to pay for her burial since they were only engaged. When Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he quoted Rish Lakish, Arusa Shemesa, that if a fiancé, a betrothed woman dies, Ein la ksuba, she does not have a ksube. She does not have a ksube. Amulu Abai said to the people, Zilu Amule, go and tell Ravin, Shkilativusech, take your, help, Shadja Achizre, and throw it on the thorns. Rav Shai already taught this in Bavel, right? Meaning, so Rav Shai had taught that the reason why he doesn't have to pay for her burial, right, and the reason why she doesn't inherit the ksuba after she dies is because it says in the ksuba that when you're able to get remarried, then you can get the ksuba, but you'll never be able to remarry. She's dead. Now came Ravin and he quoted the same exact thing from Rish Lakish. And it says, Abai, look, Ravin, we already know this from Rav Oshaya here in Bavel. So the Mishnah had continued and said that any daughters that we have together, I will pay for their sustenance, right? They will be able to be sustained from my estate until they get either become a bogeres or get married. Rav Tani adati lakhon leguvin. So Rav taught that the daughter can continue to chaparain mezainis until she gets married. V'Levi Tani adati bagron, and Levi says that she can continue chaparain mezonis until she becomes a bogeres, till she becomes 12 and a half years old. The Rav afagav de boger. So Rav says what? Even if she's a bogeres, still she can chaparain mezonis until she gets married. With the Levi afagav de insib, and Levi, even if she's even if she gets married, but she's not yet a bogeres, so then she would be able to continue chapping around mizonis, right? Meaning if she got married, but she's not yet a bogeres, she'll be able to continue chapping around mizonis. Ela boger velo insiv velo boger. No, so whichever one comes first, right? Meaning, so if she becomes 12 and a half years old and she's a bogeres and she's not yet married, so since she's 12 and a half years old, she can't chaparain mizonis anymore. Or if she gets married, even if she's less than 12 and a half years old, but she got married, so then she can no longer chaparain mizonis. T'chuli amalo plige, everyone agrees on that. Ki plige ba'arusa. For the machlokas between Rav and Levi is with regard to if she's engaged, meaning if she's married, so then memela she can't chaparain mizonis. Or if she's a bogeres, memela she can't chaparain mizonis anymore. But what if she is not a bogeres and she's not married, but she's engaged? When she is engaged, but she's not yet a bogeres. And Levi taught in his braise adati bagron that until she can chaparain mizonis until she becomes a bogeres v'yamtiz manei into insivon, and she gets married. Tarte, what? It's until both of these things are true. Ela o tibagron o yamtiz manei the isnazva. No, either she becomes a bogeres or she gets married. Until either one of those events, she can chaparain mizonis, but not after. Kitanoi, like a machlokas tanoim, admose abbas nizonis. Until when can a daughter chaparain mizonis? Achete oris. Says the Tanakama, until she gets engaged. Once she gets engaged, she can no longer chaparain mizonis. Mishum Rabbalazar Amr, they said the name of Rabbalazar achete boger, until she becomes a bogeres, i.e., it's not enough to be engaged. Tanu Rav Yosef ad dihavyon. Rav Yosef taught until there's a havoya. Yiboilu avoid the eris and avoid the nisun. We taught, what was this? Till she becomes what? Becomes engaged or becomes married? We don't exactly know what Rav Yosef was referring to. Amalei Rav Chizda Rav Yosef. Rav Chizda says to Rav Yosef, Mishmiya lach mina de Rav Yehuda Did you hear epis from Rav Yehuda? Rav Chizda asks Rav Yosef, who's a student of Rav Yehuda, did you hear epis from Rav Yehuda? Arusa yesh la mizonis o ein la mizonis, that if a girl gets engaged, can she continue to chaparain mizonis from the estate of the father? Omar lei, to which Rav Yosef responds to Rav Chizda, Majma lo shmili. Look, I didn't hear Rav Yehuda ever say, give a explanation of this particular case specifically. El misvara leisla. But logically, says Rav Yosef, I would deduce that once she gets engaged, she can no longer chaparain mizonis from the estate, because Kevin de Ersa, because once she gets engaged and she has a chosin, lo nicha le de titzil. This chosin doesn't want her to have to go around begging for food, so he's going to provide for her at that point, right? If she's an orphan and they get engaged, he's going to provide for her at that point, and therefore the estate doesn't need to provide for her anymore. Omar le, to which Rav Chizda responds to Yosef, well, in mashma lo shmialach, actually, I don't know if I agree with that sentiment. If you didn't hear that explicitly from Rav Yehuda, misvara isla, I would argue logically, says Rav Chizda, that she would have mizonis, because because since they're only engaged and they're not yet married yet, so it's not like a complete commitment yet. Who knows? Something might come up. They might end up not actually getting married. So he doesn't want to necessarily pay for his mizonis while they're sort of in this in-between state. So therefore, says Rav Chizda, maybe Yitaka won't pay for mizonis, and therefore she should get mizonis from the estate. Those who say punkt vakert, Amalei, Rav Yosef says to Rav Chizda, Mashma lo shmieli, I never heard anything specifically from Rav Yehuda about this, misvara isla, but I would say logically that she would have mizonis from the estate, because since the fiance does, he doesn't know for sure that they're going to end up getting married, he's not just going to, spend money on her, when there's a risk involved that they might not end up getting married anyways. So therefore she should be able to get mizonis from the estate, because we can't rely upon the fiance. Omerle, to which Rav Chizda responds to Rav Yosef, look, if you didn't hear that explicitly from Rav Yosef, misvara leisla, I would actually argue punkt vakert that Shitaka doesn't have a ksube, because came the er salonichale de tidzil, that she doesn't get mizonis from the estate, because I would say that once the fiance, right, once they get engaged, he's not going to want her to have to go around begging, so he would provide mizonis for her, and therefore the estate is not responsible. Says the Gemara, Simin de Gavre, Sak Zoraf Mono Meano Vivama Shnia Rusa V'Onsel. Let's go weiter. Ba'omine Mirav Sheshes, Taka As of Sheshes Mima Enes. Oh. So, if you have Epis, Omima Enes. Oh. Sechta Yivomis. So, you have a girl, her father passed away, her brother then married her off. She's a Ketana. So now, she can always just leave that marriage. So, on the one hand, she's getting married, she's a Ketana. Midoraisa, her brother cannot marry her off, but her brother did marry her off. And Midor Abanan, they're married. So, they're married, but she can always leave whenever she wants. So, so if she walks away from her husband and goes back home, yesh la mizonis or ein la mizonis? So does she go back to having mizonis? Or do we say, no, she got married, and once she gets married, she no longer gets mizonis? Amnu of Sheshes Tnisur, if Sheshes says, look, we have a Braisa. Amona bevei Savia, that if you have an Amona, right, if you have this girl who was engaged and then she gets widowed from engagement and she goes back home, Ugrusha bevei Savia, or she gets divorced from engagement and she goes back home, Vishumeres Yavam, or a girl who needs to do Yibum bebei Savia, and she's in her father's house. Interesting. Okay, fine. Yeshlo mizonis, so Shitaka has mizonis. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda Oda bebei Savia, that if she's still in her father's house, Yeshlo mizonis, she has Mizonis Eina Beves Aviha, if she's not in her father's house, Ein La Mizonis, then she doesn't have Mizonis. Rebuta Anu Tanakama. We want to say Rebuta is basically saying the same thing as the Tanakama, that if she's in her house, she has Mizonis. If she's not in her father's house, then she doesn't have Mizonis. Elav Mima Enes Ikabenayu. Let's say that the nafkamina is Mima Enes, the Tanakama Sover Isla, for Rebuta Sover Leisla. That the Tanakama would say, look, that by Mima Enes, when she goes back home, she can continue getting Mizonis from the estate. Whereas Rebuta would say, no, that once she's been married, even if she's Mima Enes, if she goes back, then she doesn't have the Ksubis, then she can't chaparai Mizonis anymore. But Rish Lakish Taka as a kasha. Pas Yivama Yesh La Mizonis o Ein La Mizonis. So if you have Sarah was married to Reuven died, Sarah is even with Shimon, now Shimon dies. So the daughter that they had together, so does she get Mizonis from Shimon's estate? So since we said Ksubas anichse baila rishon, since we said Masechta Yevamos that a Ksubis is from her original husband. So Leisla. So if the Ksubis is from the original husband, so then Shimon's estate should not be responsible for the Mizonis of the daughter, which would have been stipulated in the first Ksubis. Or maybe, since we also said in Yevamos that if there's nothing to collect the Ksubah from Reuven, so then she would collect it from Shimon. So maybe it should be like there should be Mizonis for her daughter Teku. We don't know the answer, friends. That was Daf Nun Gimel of Masechta Ksubis. We continued talking about the dowry. We had an interesting story with our Papa and Abba Surah about where he gave like this really big dowry. We talked about if a wife sells her ksuba to her husband, right? So we said if she sells her ksuba to other people, so then she still has ksubas b'nidichin. If she's mocheles her ksuba to her husband, then she forfeits the ksubas b'nidichin. But if she sells it to her husband, so we say also it's like she sold it to somebody else, that she maintains the ksubas b'nidichin. We said that if she's mocheles on her ksuba, then she also forfeits the mizonis. We said that if a girl who's engaged dies, so then the husband is not responsible to pay for her ksubah, that and her burial. And then we talked about with regards to mizonis, until what point can a daughter continue getting mizonis from the estate? Rav said until she gets engaged, whereas Levi says until she gets married. Both agree that once she's a bogeres, she cannot get mizonis from the estate anymore. But if she's not yet a bogeres, Rav would say once she gets engaged, she can no longer chaparai mizonis. And then Levi said that no, so it's until she gets married. Okay, fine, very very good, friends. That was afternoon Gimel of Masechta Ksubis. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.